Drew, Dave, thank you so much for chatting with me today. I'm excited to dive right in. So, Drew, the Inner Harbor Water Treatment Campus. Can you describe what that is?
I'd love to. So the Inner Harbor Water Treatment Campus is going to be the first municipally owned and operated seawater desalination project in Texas. And it's important to note, I think, that this is going to be it's publicly financed, it's going to be publicly owned, it's going to be publicly operated by the same staff that operate water treatment plants today for the city of Corpus Christi. So this is a little bit of a new technology for the city of Corpus Christi, but it's not new technology at all. Seawater plants are built and operated all over the world. So we're bringing to Texas something that is a little bit unfamiliar with our community, but it's something that is around the world and has been operated well and safely, and certainly with the environmental stewardship that all of us expect it to have.
That's great. And can you talk a little about the city of Corpus Christi, the area, what the water need is, and how much water we can expect from Inner Harbor once it's up and running?
So the plant is designed to be 30 million gallons a day of drinking water. Mm-hmm. The plant is going to be at times able to operate at a flow more than that. There will be times that it'll be able to operate up to 36 million gallons a day. Mm-hmm. One of the things that's important to say is that this plant meets the demands, our 2040 demands for residential and commercial businesses. That's a long time. 30 million gallons a day of drinking water, of drought-proof drinking water, is something that our community needs. It's something that we've been talking about for a long time. And so we're really ready to deliver a project that can meet these expectations that, frankly, we've been talking about for a long time.
Yeah, and drought-proof, you said that. I think that's
Drought-proof.
Really key to that as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Maybe we'll take a step back here. Dave, can you explain to us how desalination works?
Desalination is basically taking salt water and converting it to fresh water. Okay. And the process results in three things. It takes all the impurities out of the water, and all those impurities go to the landfill. And it creates fresh water that is basically pure, and that water goes into the water supply system for use by people, businesses, and maybe even agriculture at times. And the third thing it produces is brine, which is also generally pretty pure, except that it has more salt in it than the water that it came from. Those are the products of desalination.
Okay. And is desalination a new idea? Is it something that's been around for a while?
People have been desalinating water for thousands of years.
Okay. That is not new then.
No, not new. And it's been something that certainly countries that are arid and have coastal systems, they've been using desal for decades. And it certainly became more common and on a much grander scale since the 1950s. Texas, we have groundwater desal in the Rio Grande Valley, in San Antonio, in El Paso. So desalination in Texas is not a new process. It's been used and is being used to take salt out of groundwater for drinking water purposes in a lot of places in Texas.
Okay. And Drew, why do we need to have this desalination technology in Corpus Christi?
I would say the reason we need it is because we live in a drought-stricken climate in South Texas. Drought is not something that's new to South Texas. It's something that is going to come and go as long as we live here. Drought is just part of the landscape. And I will tell you, I think folks before us have done a tremendous job looking at the more costly effective water supplies. So surface water is a water that we have done a tremendous job securing. Okay. We have surface water from 3 different river basins. Unfortunately, surface water is 100% dependent upon rainfall, and seawater is not. And so in order for us to be a resilient city that has some ability to be sort of protected by these droughts that we are in terms of having that water supply diversity, we need to have seawater desalination as part of one of our several water treatment supplies or water supplies. As Dave has just said, groundwater is another supply that we feel like we need to capitalize on at some point. Frankly, right now, the most cost-effective supply for us to leverage is the supply that is seawater, and that's what we're doing today.
And the fresh water that the Inner Harbor campus produces, who gets that water? Who has access to it?
It's an easy answer. Everybody. Everybody gets this water. So residential community, the commercial business community, everybody who lives in the city of Corpus Christi, it is going to be essentially the water from our project, from our plant, our Inner Harbor Water Treatment Campus, is going to be conveyed to today an underutilized asset called Navigation Pump Station. And that pump station is going to be the means by which the water that we have from this new water supply conveyed and distributed throughout the city. And so the short answer to your question and the easy answer is everybody's going to have an opportunity to benefit from this water supply.
That's great. That's the answer we want to hear. That's really good. And Dave, is there any danger to the marine life living anywhere near like where the water will come into the plant and where it goes back out? Any danger to the marine life in those areas?
No. There's concern associated with water being taken into the desalination plant and water being discharged from the desalination plant. But the facility is going to use the best available technology that's known and is used worldwide. So water coming into the desalination plant is going to go through these very large cylinders that's covered with very fine mesh screens. So if you can imagine the mesh on your windows, the window screens, the mesh is going to be that small.
Okay.
And so it will prevent any larval fish, shrimp, or other eggs from coming into the water, into the desalination plant. The water coming in through that fine mesh screen will be coming in at a very low pressure so that these very small microscopic organisms won't get stuck to the screen. They'll be able to move away from the screen. So additionally, the intake is about 20 feet below the surface of the water. And we know that most of the organisms that we care about, the marine life, are in those upper layers of water. They're closer to the surface. So where it's located minimizes its exposure to the marine life we care about. On the other side, the discharge, we know that the discharge is going to actually be cleaner than the water that it came from in the intake, because the impurities are going to be removed in the desalination process. It will have more salt, but all those impurities will be removed. Additionally, it will have more oxygen than the water from the intake because of the treatment process actually adds more oxygen to the water, and that will add oxygen and protect marine life. We know the salt level is going to be more concentrated, but because of the system where it's going to be shot out into the Inner Harbor, sort of like a giant squirt gun, it's going to mix that water very quickly in a matter of minutes and dilute it to a salinity that's very close to the salinity at the intake. So we don't expect there to be any measurable impact on marine life associated with salinity.
That's great. Now I'm curious a little more about that discharge. I've heard this term brine being used. Can you explain what brine is?
Brine basically is salty water, and in the context of desalination, we're saying that brine is just water that's saltier water than the water going into the desalination plant.
Okay. Okay. And so I think we have an example of brine here,
We
right?
do. So I'll give you a little background on this. So the city of Corpus Christi went to California last June, specifically to the city of Santa Barbara, where they own and operate a desalination plant. And we asked the staff at the city of Santa Barbara if we or they could collect a sample of their brine that goes back out into their receiving body where it comes from, or where it's intaked from.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is a real example of what concentrate looks like from a seawater desalination plant.
Okay.
And I will tell you that I think it's important for, our viewers to see it, because I think there is naturally some fear that, this looks a little bit perplexing. It could look,
Right.
Maybe kind of not so great.
Yeah.
And I think to our viewers, when they see that, I think it's sometimes a little bit of a surprise. We take this on show and tells when we go around to various community engagement meetings, and we put that out there for the public to see. I think the other thing that's important is that we will be building a pilot plant in the next few months where the public can actually see with their own eyes what our concentrate's going to look like on our project site, so that they don't necessarily have to look at a site or a sample from California.
Sure. Yeah, I hear brine, I think like pickle juice, but this is perfectly clear. It looks nice. It's
Right,
great.
right.
Okay. Awesome. And will that brine that's produced in this process have any negative impacts on the Inner Harbor area?
No, because of the process by which it's shot back into the Inner Harbor, it's going to be diluted very quickly within 200 or 300 feet. And that dilution is going to return it very close to the salinity at the intake.
Great. And Dave, can you tell us a little bit more about what environmental models have been used to study the impacts of the project?
There have been at least three actually at least four models that have been run that have assessed the potential effect of the desalination plant on Corpus Christi Bay. And all of those have the same result in that the expected or the modeled impact is that the salinity would change less than 1 part per thousand. And we know that change of less than 1 part per thousand is a change that the bay can see on a daily basis as the tide comes in or out, or freshwater inflow changes. So that change of less than 1 part per thousand salinity is not going to be ecologically significant.
Great. That 1 part per thousand, I mean, that's like less than a drop in a much larger sample. That's great.
Yeah.
And Drew, why was that particular Inner Harbor location selected?
For us, it really comes down to three things. So it's all about affordability, environmental stewardship, and resiliency. And so when we were looking at the preferred location for a seawater desalination site, we were keeping those parameters very much in mind. We know that it's imperative that we have a cost that our ratepayers can afford. We know that one of the biggest costs of any infrastructure project, water supply project, is pipeline. So being able to have the water as close to where our community lives was a big part of the factors that went into evaluating what was the right location. We also recognized that there was very important, as Dave just described, environmental modeling, water quality modeling that had to be done, which we did. And so what we determined was that we could build a sustainable, reliable seawater water treatment plant at the Inner Harbor location of the size that we've just talked about, where we have very minimal impact to the environment. We also recognize, and I say this a lot, we're a regional water provider. And if you look at the 7 larger cities than Corpus Christi, they all have at least 3 water treatment plants. We have 1.
That's interesting.
So it's really important from my perspective to have a second standalone water treatment plant, which this is. And so we think that this really helps our city in terms of being more resilient. Certainly if something happened to our one and only water treatment plant, we would have some significant challenges. But if we have this plant operating at 36 million gallons a day, it at least allows us to have some water in the system. It may not be at the pressure that we all want,
Right.
but we know that's important.
That's great. Now, Dave, I know that the facility has received multiple state and federal permits. Can you talk to us about what those are, what that means?
Sure. The state and 4 different agencies with the state have actually looked at this project. So the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality has issued it a permit that allows it to take water out of the inner harbor for this purpose. And it very recently issued a permit for it to discharge the brine back into the inner harbor. So that's important because the state is basically saying that we believe that the water quality standards in the inner harbor are going to be protected by this operation. We also know the Texas General Land Office has looked at it to ensure that it complies with the Coastal Zone Management Plan for the state. Texas Water Development Board did an environmental review when they granted the city funding to support the project. And the Texas Historical Commission also looked at the project to ensure it wasn't going to impact any important archaeological resources. Great. On the federal side, the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency also looked at the discharge and confirmed that it would not impact the water quality standards in the inner harbor. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers issued a permit very recently that allows the city to construct the intake and the discharge structures and the pipelines in the inner harbor that are needed for the project. In the course of that Corps of Engineers permit review, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service reviewed the project. The National Marine Fisheries Service reviewed the project, as again, Texas Parks and Wildlife and the Texas General Land Office also had input through that process. And finally, the city has sought funding from the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation to support the project. And as part of that grant application, there was an additional environmental review for that Bureau of Reclamation permit or grant.
I would imagine all of those have a pretty rigorous review process.
Yes.
They take this very seriously.
Yes.
Yeah, that's great.
Well, and all that takes time.
Sure.
And I think there has been some in the community that have been frustrated that it has taken this long.
Yeah, we want water.
We want water, and I think the answer to the question is the process has to play out. It has to go through all the reviews that Dave has just described to make sure that we meet the standards and that we protect our environment.
Sure. And I will actually build on that. When can we expect to see water coming from the Inner Harbor Water Treatment Campus?
Well, we're moving as quickly as possible. I would say that the current plan is that in about the second quarter of 2028, we should have drinking water being provided out of this new water treatment plant.
That's great. That's really exciting. Drew, do you see any other? Obviously, getting that water is the biggest benefit that we'll see from this plant. But do you see any other benefits to the city of Corpus Christi from constructing the water treatment campus?
I see the biggest benefit. I think one of the biggest benefits is that I think the entire state of Texas is really looking for a sustainable water supply solution. And I think the state has been patiently waiting to see a project get delivered. I think that we feel a lot of pressure on us because we want to deliver a project that meets those expectations. Part of the reason we absolutely want to do it is because it's the right thing to do. But we also know that we think this will be hopefully a beacon and a model for future plants to be built on the Texas Gulf Coast. This is the right project for the right time at the right place. So we believe that if we can do this right, which we know we will, this will be hopefully a model that will be used in years to come.
Yeah, I love that. The right project, the right time, the right place. That's us. We're the right place. That's great. Okay, last question. Drew, if people have other questions about the Inner Harbor Water Treatment Campus, where can they go? What can they search for, call?
There's a number of places they can go to get answers. I think we have one of the best websites. It continuously gets better. We're always open for public input and comment. People can reach out on the website. There's a portal that people can ask questions, and we're monitoring that website. There's a host of us that are happy to meet. We always say if folks want to have a meeting, if they want us to come talk to whatever community session they would like, we're open for that. Most people have my phone number. I'm pretty unabashed to give my phone number out, maybe too often,
right.
But I'm happy to talk to anybody who has questions. Frankly, I kind of like to just go to the grocery store and have spontaneous conversations with people and ask them what they know.
Awesome. Okay. Well, you heard it here. You can talk to Drew Molley over the apples in the ATB.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you, gentlemen. I learned a lot from this, and I hope our viewers did too. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching Inside City Hall. For more information on today's topics, visit our website and be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel so you can stay connected, stay informed, and stay tuned for the next Inside City Hall.